Hello, and welcome to Roly Poly Weight Loss. As always, I am your host, Roly Poly, and today is a Monday, so let's get going. We have our scale. Okay. $272.0. Okay. Excellent. I'll take it. All right. Welcome to day 33. Let's get started. Okay. So today we are continuing our assessment of factors that you need to consider for your lowercase d diet. And today's factor is number 2, your environment. Now, in combining the lists, I have broken down environment into 3 subfactors. The first is an abundance of food. The second is sedentary snacking. And the third is aggressive marketing. So we'll go through those in order. Now, environment tends to tie in with genetics, as you saw last time. It's hard to talk about the one without the other. This is something that comes up in the WebMD article, as Dr. Lee says so pithily. Genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. So last time I touched on how while you get your genetics from your parents, you also get a portion of your environment from your parents. And Harvard Health elaborates or explains this. Childhood habits often stick with people for the rest of their lives. Kids who drink sugary sodas and eat high-calorie processed foods develop a taste for these products and continue eating them as adults, which tends to promote weight gain. Likewise, kids who watch television and play video games instead of being active may be programming themselves for a sedentary future. So when we talk about what a person gets from their parents, sometimes we're talking about genetics, sometimes we're talking about environment, and sometimes we can't necessarily specify if it's one or the other only because they're so closely linked. So that's why I touched on environment last time in genetics, and I'm touching on genetics here in environment, because there's a lot where we're just not positive how much we can separate them. Okay. The Explained docuseries talked to Dr. Christopher Gardner, and he agrees that genetics and environment are linked. One of the things we also know is that genetics haven't changed appreciably over the last 30 years that have corresponded with the rise of the obesity epidemic. Our genes may not have changed much, but our food environment has. So looking at how our environment interacts with our genes is kind of important because that's what has changed. And this is something that we touched on last time from Why Are We Getting So Fat? Dr. Giles Yeo said, "In the developed world, we've never had so much available to eat and so little to do. In the last 20 years, the number of takeaways has soared. And research has shown that living and working near a high density of takeaway outlets doubles your likelihood of being obese." So before, we talked about how this relates to your genetic inclination for obesity. But on its own, purely as an environmental factor, that is a huge statistic. You're basically twice as likely to be obese if you live in a fast food saturated environment as if you don't. But this statistic isn't as straightforward as it seems. The prevalence of fast food ties in to food availability. As Healthline notes, food, especially junk food, is everywhere now. Shops display tempting foods where they are most likely to gain your attention. Another problem is that junk food is often cheaper than healthy whole foods, especially in America. Junky fast food is usually cheaper than a more healthy alternative. For example, a place like Soup Plantation, where you can have a large salad, other healthy choices, costs $10 for lunch, not counting a drink. So if you're getting a drink, closer to 12, 13. And more than that for dinner. That's the cheaper version. On the other hand, I can get a $5 fill-up at KFC or a combo at Taco Bell for $5 to $6, and those include drinks, and the price doesn't change during the day. Some of them even offer deals at certain times of day, like Taco Bell makes drinks cheaper in the middle of the afternoon. So I can feed 2 people fast food for the same price as 1 person at Soup Plantation. If I'm on a budget and have more than 1 person to feed, what am I going to do? So sure, the fast food is less healthy, but sometimes cost is the more crucial factor. And of course, it also bears asking if your local environment even has a place like Soup Plantation. I say Soup Plantation because I'm from Southern California, which is where Soup Plantation originated. And even still, there are only about 100 soup plantations across the country, though I'm sure there are similar types of restaurants. But even if we just take Southern California, where again, it originated, it's the most prevalent location. There are just a dozen soup plantations in the San Diego area and 1 in LA. And in contrast, there are over 5,000 Taco Bells in the country, with almost 1,000 of those in California. And over 50 are in the San Diego and LA alone, just from me looking at a map. And that's nothing on McDonald's, which has almost 14,000 locations in the US. Now, that is just comparing 1 to 1. Okay, and already there's a huge number of Taco Bells compared to soup plantations. But how many other places are there that are like a soup plantation? Sizzler, maybe some place like Hometown Buffet or Golden Corral, where you can go to a buffet and then they'll have a salad bar portion. So that's what, maybe 4 places, 5 maybe, that might have that healthier type of food for semi-reasonable prices in your area. How many fast food chains are there? Like 2 dozen? McDonald's, Taco Bell, KFC, Burger King, Wendy's, all of the different pizza places. Forgot the word pizza. All of the different pizza brands. I mean, there's a handful just in pizza places. So you're really looking at a ratio that is heavily stacked towards the less healthy, cheaper fast food. So, what is more likely to be close by to you? The cheap, ubiquitous, unhealthy option, or the expensive, rare, healthy option? Now, tied into this is food deserts, which is probably a term you've heard of. It's cropped up quite a bit in the last few years. And also a term you probably haven't heard of, I hadn't, which is food swamps. So a food desert is a location where people don't have ready access to supermarkets or other sources of fresh, healthy food. The general notion is that these people only have access to fast food or convenience store type food, and that getting to a supermarket to get fresh food, either because of distance or because of lack of transportation, is unreasonable. Now, there had been quite a bit about how food deserts were affecting obesity because people couldn't get healthy food. So, the Washington Post has a very intriguing article on this. The idea that areas that lack of access to a full-service supermarkets, aka food deserts, promoted obesity, made theoretical sense, Dibowitz says. And it was a testable thesis. So it got tested. Scientists looked closely at the relationship grocery access had to obesity and tracked changes to obesity and other health outcomes in low-access neighborhoods that got a new supermarket. It turns out that grocery stores don't correlate cleanly with obesity, and a new grocery store is unlikely to make a dent in obesity rates. And those results came up in study after study after study. Now, this is where we try to fight against that last bullet point, misinformation. Now, this research does not suggest that food deserts are unimportant by any means. Access to healthy food would certainly have an impact on anyone's lowercase d diet. But science has shown no direct correlation to obesity specifically. For example, the Washington Post author notes, the obesity needle might not move, but Dubowitz found that the new supermarket she studied in Pittsburgh was associated with several smaller changes. Study participants reported eating a little better, less sugar, fewer calories. People felt better about living in the neighborhood. None of this was specifically attributable to the supermarket, as people who didn't shop at it reported the same changes as those who did, but it raises the possibility that a supermarket can help improve a neighborhood in ways that go beyond food access. It brings jobs and could pave the way for more investment. It can make the area feel safer. So, solving the food desert problem can certainly help people, but it won't automatically cure obesity. And when you think about that a little further, that makes sense. If your habit is to go to the convenience store to get your ramen and soda or whatever, and your taste buds are attuned to that kind of food, and maybe you have a double FTO risk variant that makes you crave those foods, and then the existence of the supermarket in your food environment isn't going to instantly change all of your other factors, which the article agrees with. Step back and look at how much has changed in our food environment over the past several decades. We're navigating a landscape of diabolically irresistible food, specifically designed to swamp our willpower, both by being engineered for deliciousness and by being available everywhere we turn. In that context, it makes sense that simply moving a produce section into the neighborhood won't change much. So, looking at food deserts and trying to turn them into not deserts is a good thing. Adding that supermarket to a neighborhood definitely helps it in multiple ways, including health. But that isn't necessarily going to fix our weight problem, and this is where we encounter our new term. There's a journal article archived in the National Library of Medicine that poses an interesting distinction. They introduce to me, the term food swamp. So, as they explain, food swamps have been described as areas with a high density of establishments selling high-calorie fast food and junk food relative to healthier food options. Now, you can see this is subtly different from a food desert, which deals specifically with a lack of good options. A swamp might have good food options, but they're just overwhelmed by junk options. So this is what happens initially, I think, when you try to fix a food desert. You put a grocery store in there, but that just turns it into a swamp. There's still all those unhealthy options around that people are used to going to because they didn't have the supermarket in the first place. Now you work on improving the swamp. So this is a step. So this is just like what Dr. Yo was talking about before with people who live in a place with a high density of fast food outlets or takeaways. It's not that there are no good options, it's that there are more bad options. And the journal's authors actually agree with that. Our results suggest that the presence of a food swamp is a stronger predictor of obesity rates than the absence of full-service grocery stores. We found, even after controlling for food desert effects, food swamps have a positive, statistically significant effect on adult obesity rates. There you go. Now, they do offer one caveat, though, in that future studies should find a way to adjust for the possibility that obese adults choose to live in neighborhoods that are food swamps. So, they didn't account for that in their study. It might be an issue of, like, which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing here, where did they become obese because they live in a food swamp, or did they choose the food swamp when they were moving because they were obese and used to that kind of food? We're not sure yet. Future studies needed. But cause and effect aside, if you live in a food swamp, you should consider that when you're forming your food plan. Likewise, if you live in a food desert, that will also be a consideration, but in subtly different ways. So, our next sub-factor is sedentary snacking. I touched on this earlier when talking about how we can even get fast food delivered now for the absolute minimum amount of effort. And so far, we've largely been talking about environment as something outside of the house. But Harvard Health makes a good point that your inside environment and habits are also important. They note, the average American watches about 4 hours of television per day, a habit that's been linked to overweight or obesity in a number of studies. People with overweight and obesity spend more time watching television and playing video games than people of normal weight. Watching television more than 2 hours a day also raises the risk of overweight in children, even in those as young as 3 years old. Now, you might assume, kind of logically, that this ties into exercise. If you're watching TV, you're not being active. Or conversely, if you're not watching TV, you might do something active instead. But the study referenced by Harvard Health points to a different reasoning. Studies show that eating food in front of the TV stimulates people to eat more calories, and particularly more calories from fat. In fact, a study that limited the amount of TV kids watched demonstrated that this practice helped them lose weight, but not because they became more active when they weren't watching TV. The difference was that the children ate more snacks when they were watching television than when doing other activities, even sedentary ones. So, something about the environment of watching TV, even compared to other sedentary activities like reading or sewing, leads to snacking and potentially becoming overweight. So, this is really interesting because there are all these ideas about how, you can get a little more exercise into your day by just, when you're watching TV, stand up and move during the commercial breaks. I mean, that's something I've suggested. But the idea that, if you cut down on the TV, even to do something else sedentary, even to read a book or a magazine or something, or to do a hobby, knitting, sewing, learning to play the guitar, whatever, even if you're still sitting and being less active, you won't snack, so you won't gain as much weight, is really interesting to talk about your environment, that it's specifically the TV, not the inactivity, that accounts for at least a small amount. Not all of it, obviously, but a small amount of our environmental factor of being overweight. So that's really, really interesting. All right, bell went off. Now, another thing that might influence TV-related snacking is advertising. Though many people stream their TV now, or fast forward through advertisements, it can't be wholly responsible. And I haven't found a study that compared the two, streaming versus a commercial-filled version. But just watching a few minutes of commercials on TV will give you an abundance of food ads. Harvard Health concurs and expands on this. Food advertisements may play a significant role. The average hour-long TV show features about 11 food and beverage commercials, which encourage people to eat. And Healthline points out that these ads are not exactly innocuous. Junk food producers are very aggressive marketers. Their tactics can get unethical at times, and they sometimes try to market very unhealthy products as healthy foods. These companies also make misleading claims. What's worse, they target their marketing specifically towards children. So, now we're getting into our third environmental factor, aggressive marketing. And also, again, we're touching on misinformation. We're going to be covering a lot about misinformation when we talk about marketers. So, Science Daily has a fascinating article about this. Health-related buzzwords, such as antioxidant, gluten-free, and whole grain, lull consumers into thinking packaged food products labeled with those words are healthier than they actually are, according to a new research study conducted by scholars at the University of Houston. So, the study looked at the degree to which we consumers can be fooled by these kinds of buzzwords by showing them actual marketing images that included them. And then they photoshopped out that healthy word and showed them a version that didn't have it. So they took the original ad. They didn't add words. They took the original marketing ad that had this random healthy buzzword on it. And they colored that out and then said, okay, here you go. And it found that consumers tend to view food products labeled with health-related euphemisms as healthier than those without them. The research also showed that the nutrition facts panels printed on food packaging, as required by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, do little to counteract that buzzword marketing. So, if it says something like, with antioxidants on it, and you flip it over and look at the back and look at the nutrition fact panel, and there's no antioxidants listed, apparently people still will believe the antioxidants part from the front, or that perception of healthier from the front, even if they don't see it in the nutrition panel. So what they did with the nutrition fact panels is, I think, more telling than the buzzwords on the foods. So they also showed 2 labels at a time from 2 different products. And they had the study participants pick the one they perceived as healthier. So just the nutrition labels. Food marketers say there are nutrition labels so people can find out what's healthy and what's not, he said. Findings from this research study indicate people aren't very good at reading nutritional labels, even in situations where they are choosing between salmon and Spam. Approximately 20% picked Spam as the healthier option over salmon, said Northrop. So, 20% of the people who looked at these labels were confused or misled about the actual health benefits of the contents, even without buzzwords, just looking at the nutritional facts. That's kind of scary. You can have something that is absolute junk, okay, like junky, sugary cereal, like Fruit Loops type of stuff, right? And if it says something like, based on real fruit, or infused with real fruit, or composed of fruit juices, or something with the word actual fruit, okay, that people could read that and think, oh, look, this box of probably 90% sugar is healthier than something like oatmeal, which doesn't have fruit in it, so, this is healthier. And then they can look at the nutrition facts on the back and go, yeah, I was right, and decide to eat that instead, which is kind of mind-boggling. And then there's actually another reason to be freaked out by this, because those labels, those nutrition labels on the back, aren't as good as we think they are, even if we are reading them correctly. U.S. News and World Report explains this in their article. Unfortunately, nutrition facts labels are not always factual. For starters, the law allows a pretty lax margin of error, up to 20%, for the stated value versus actual value of nutrients. In reality, that means a 100-calorie pack could, theoretically, contain up to 120 calories and still not be violating the law. The same margin of error goes for other nutrients as well. So, as they point out, for diabetics who are counting carbs, or people with high blood pressure who are counting their sodium, or anyone else counting a specific aspect from the labels, maybe somebody with an iron deficiency or vitamin K deficiency, this margin of error can be a huge problem. And me personally, as someone who has, counted calories, and as someone who has a diabetic family member, type 1, who has counted carbs, that is really, really upsetting that there can be that huge of a margin of error, or just a lie, about what you're eating. And the fact that that's the rule, to me, is like, I realize there's bigger problems out there, but that's kind of a problem. that shouldn't be allowed. So this article goes into specific detail about vitamin A and iron content. And these are the two nutrients they said that are often outside the 20% margin of error when they tested. So not only can they be within 20% of what they say on the label, that's not even always what they do. So this goes back to when we were talking about things like dietary supplements and vitamins, where there was no regulation that what they put on the label actually be what's inside and in that amount. Now, with food, there is a requirement, but it turns out they don't always meet it. Sometimes they just are lying, whether accidentally or on purpose. So, like I said, vitamin A and iron, this study found, were the two most often where the numbers did not match or weren't even within 20%. Either it was less than 20% of what they said it was, or it was more than 20% of what they said it was. 20% off from what they said it was. So they pointed out several problematic labels. And my favorite is the one for a cereal that supposedly gains 5% of your daily amount of iron when you add milk to it. Because, cereal often has the without milk, with milk on their nutrition labels now. And this one, in the with milk category, had 5% more iron than without. But milk doesn't have iron. So apparently adding iron-free milk to this cereal magically made 5% your daily value of iron just appear out of thin air and zap into your bowl. That is blatant lying. And if, let's say, you don't know this, and you're someone who is iron deficient and you need more iron, and you think, oh, hey, look, if I have this cereal with milk, I'll have, so much more of my daily amount of iron, you won't. It's lying. And that can lead to health problems. So they offer a rule of thumb: unless a packaged non-meat food is iron fortified, in which case the word iron would appear in the ingredient list, any labels claim to have more than 10% of the daily value for iron per serving should be viewed with great suspicion. So again, if it's not meat, which is where we get most of our iron from, and it doesn't list iron as an ingredient, that they've jabbed iron into it, don't trust it if it has a high amount of iron, or even a moderate amount of iron, more than 10%. That milk thing, when you added the milk that didn't have iron in it, was over 10%. So that's kind of bonkers. Now, the problem with these labels is that, as US News explains, the FDA has never established a systematic, random label auditing process, and compliance with the law is expected to be self-enforced by food manufacturers. Self-enforcement of something that they know we're confused about, that they can lie to us and get away with it, and will buy something that we think is better for us when they know it isn't. Self-enforcement. Yeah, that works. Just like the thing with nutritional supplements and vitamins, that they can put whatever they want on the label, they can put whatever they want inside, and we'll buy it. And this supposedly is regulated, but when you're self-regulating, you can do whatever you want. So why would they want to tell us anything bad? Or for that matter, anything less than ideal? I mean, I'm honestly amazed they don't just put 100% of everything on every package. They can get away with it. What would we know? It's almost enough to make you not trust the labels or food manufacturers at all. And if they aren't truthful on their labels, why would their commercials be any different? We've all heard the part of a balanced breakfast lie. Yeah, okay, adding orange juice to your Fruit Loops is going to make them suddenly better? Psh. Setting aside everything you know about how orange juice isn't actually as healthy as it claims to be, that's not going to fix the giant amount of sugar you're getting for the not any nutrients that it claims it has. And we've all seen the teeny tiny fine print on the bottom of a commercial and not bothered to pause and get a magnifying glass and read it. So this, again, all ties into that misinformation factor that we've touched on throughout. That the food companies are out to sell their food. They're not out to make us healthy. They're not out to make us informed. They're not out to make us pick wisely. They're out to sell their particular product. And they do that by misinforming us, and then by throwing all of this aggressive marketing down our throat. I mean, when you think about it, take that cereal commercial. What is it officially advertising? Cereal. When it shows you that balanced breakfast at the end, what is it also subtly advertising? Okay? Not just you should have this bowl of cereal for breakfast, but you should also have milk and juice, and usually eggs and bacon, and maybe a muffin or a biscuit or something. Okay? That's a lot of food. That's probably like half our daily calories we should be having, all shown as a balanced breakfast or a typical breakfast. Even if we don't buy that cereal, what is that subtly telling our brains about what breakfast should look like? It should look big. I mean, sometimes they go further and they'll have like a bowl of yogurt with fruit or something on it. I mean, they'll have enough food there to serve 3 people in your one balanced breakfast. Think about those restaurants that have endless whatever. Endless French fries, endless breadsticks, endless apps, whatever. And they're showing like bringing more and more food to this table. They always show completely filled tables with all of this food on it. And they're just subtly telling you all of this food, and it all looks amazing and good, and now you're hungry. So this specifically commercials aspect of our environment, that they're just aggressively marketing at us, and that it can tweak our perception of how food should be, should look, should be portion sized, should be paired with, should, taste, smell, everything. And we're going to get more detail on that last part when we talk specifically about food. But just the way that they advertise in our environment, on TV, in billboards, and even on the packaging, in terms of the fancy words they put on it and the stuff they put on the nutrition label to try to make you think it's something it's not. This all contributes to our environment of food around us, which all contributes to obesity. And it's important to keep these things in mind when you're considering your lowercase d diet plan. And in general, your living plan of what is around you. It's a little stressful to think about how much these food companies do.
Activity completed.
Oh, there we go. So, keep all of that in mind when talking about your environment. It's not just your outside your house environment. It's also inside your house, what you see on TV, what you have in your cupboards, and it's also what you see in the grocery store. So this has been Roly Poly Weight Loss. As always, I am your host, Roly Poly. Use the hashtag food advertising to share any crazy commercials or labels you've seen. There are some bonkers ones out there. I'll share some of my own. And please join me next time.